This is Tiffany Rosier, the host of the Afros and Knives podcast. We use the Anchor podcasting app to create and distribute the show. Creating a podcast on Anchor is effortless. It allows you to record a high-quality podcast and distribute it everywhere, including Google Podcast and Apple Podcast. They distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. No fancy equipment or podcasting experience is necessary, and it's 100% free. As long as you have a story to tell, Anchor is the platform to use. Share your story through audio using the Anchor app for Android, iPhone, or your desktop. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Welcome back to the Afros and Knives podcast. I am your host, Tiffany Rosier, and this week's conversation is with wine luminary, visionary, and leader Nicole Kearney of vegan wine brand Sip and Share Wines. We talk about beginnings, building a legacy, and the wisdom of quitting what no longer serves you. Listen to the Afros and Knives podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast. New episodes are available every Tuesday. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Nicole Kearney with Sip and Share Wines, and we are a micro winery, and we produce a variety of vegan wines. They are all delicious, and all wines are not vegan. And really, I started this company because we wanted to make sure that Black and brown people who are not invited to the table and who are not are underserved and underrepresented in the wine industry could have that place and hold a space for them. That's Sip and Share Wines.
Hey, well, and so for your personal journey into wine and, becoming an educator, becoming a producer, what was your first few steps and what kind of drew you into what I really consider any food or wine career for me is a calling. And so when did you first hear the call to get into wine, especially as specifically as you have with vegan wines?
So for me, wine, I think like most people, so I grew up, I'm from the East Coast, but then my dad was in the military, so I'm a military brat. So spent some time overseas, and the culture of wine and beer is significantly different than in the United States. So was exposed at an earlier age to a lot of great beverages, which over in this country is like so taboo. In Europe and Italy, in France, wine is just an extension of the meal. So that was kind of like that first understanding when I came back to the US that there was this real huge deficit. And then getting into graduate school and drinking, and I'm a writer by trade. And so the impetus even for the company and how it originally started was in graduate school. We would basically sip our wine and then share about our writing and, what was going on in our lives. And so that is when I started thinking about wine beyond just, this beverage that we drink to really, thinking about, where does wine come from and, all the expansive rabbit holeness of wine. And then I was just doing wine tastings that I didn't even know that was a thing, like home wine tastings for family and friends. And then one day I just was like, where are the Black people in wine? And did a Google search, and there were about 30 people, companies listed. And I was like, wow, we don't no, and we don't think about that when we go to drink and purchase. And so for me, it was about, initially the company was all about pouring other Black and brown winemakers and taking them into people's homes and educating people about they exist. And then just with some legal issues and things, you know, the alcohol industry is very, very regulated. Kind of for us, the pivot was to become a winery. And then I have so many family and friends that are vegan or vegetarian. And I used to be vegetarian for forever. And then I'm a pescatarian now. And so I just wanted to drink something that was healthier and better and lighter. And all my friends complained that were vegan, they couldn't find anything on the shelf. So I was like, oh, and I never thought about it as this super, we were doing something super niche or niche, but we are. So we're Black, Black owned, woman owned, and we make vegan wine. So that puts us in this ultra super niche space.
Wow. Now, because you actually are my first producer to be in an interview, so I'm like wholly intrigued on the production side of this, because we don't get to hear about that, because the last few interviews I had with a few of the other ladies who work in wine and work in wine education, we really were able to dig into the idea that wine is not really part of Black households in the United States. You find it in other households, you find it in other cultures. They usually still are, the topic is still very taboo and very elite or elitist. But outside of that, it's not, it wasn't like I would walk into my grandmother's house or my auntie's house or somebody, or our Black neighbor's house, and there was a wine selection there, and it wasn't something that came up in conversation. It wasn't something that was just part of our everyday food conversations. And so we've kind of dug into that quite a bit. So now I'm really interested in hearing, like, when you were thinking about getting into production, what did that look like? Because I imagine, like, if you only were finding 30 people, in a Google search covering, all ends and spectrums of wine at this point, I can only imagine, like, the number of producers. Probably, I'm not finding that many as it is in the States. So for producers, like, what was that conversation like? When you got to the place, it was like, okay, you know what, production is, that's where this needs to go. What did that look like? What did that journey look like as you started to kind of step into the production space?
So we kind of got into that, having, again, met a lot of the great folks that work in wine. Bonita Johnson, who is with the Vine Wine Club, and Marcy Jones, who is the founder of Urban Connoisseur. So those two women became my mentors, and they kind of guided me and gave me some direction. And I got to meet a lot of great winemakers. So I've, had the opportunity to meet Mac, who is basically, the godfather of Black wine. So Mac McDonald. I've gotten to meet Phil Long with Longevity, Theodora, Queen Theopatra. So getting to meet some of the folks who were, I would call, some of our elders in the wine business, and getting to see how they do their work, and I've visited everyone but Mac. I have not visited his location, but getting to meet them, visit them, see their process. And then that kind of just intrigued me. And then being a creative person as well, I was like, I wonder if I can do this. And really, my children pushed me into it. Because they were trying to find a gift. And at the time, my children weren't old enough to go buy me wine. And so they found a winemaking class and they gifted that to me. And they were like, here, that's something we could pay for and you can do. And so it was like, oh, this is cool. And so I went to the class and I was like, oh, and I made some wine. And my first wine was a Merlot, and a Chilean Merlot. And I was like, okay. And then it was about a year and a half later, probably about a year before we broke out the first bottle and drank it. And it was like, people were like, okay. And I didn't tell anybody. I just poured it. I didn't know, no announcement. I just poured it. People were like, oh, this is good. Oh, wow. Okay. And I'm like, oh, so, I'm doing this thing. And I think I'm going to make wine. And so everybody was like, oh, you should do that. They were like, you drink a lot, you kind of are in the wine world. And that was really the impetus, but you don't know how hard it is to really do it until you get into it. And so I've just been fortunate that I've been able to call people and ask questions. Paul Charles with Charles Wine Company, I call him regularly and we talk. Again, Marcy with Urban Connoisseur, I talk to her probably once a month, just like she knows that back and that the business end. And so just having those folks to call and give you like that mentorship and just say, you can do it. And then, I took my wines for Phil to taste. So Phil and Marcy, her sister Cherry, and Deborah Long, who's now has transitioned on. I got to take my wine to them. And it was a great experience because to get what I consider one of the master Black winemakers to taste your wine and give you notes, that's a cool thing to have that opportunity. And for me, I kind of knew I was on the right path and, I could do this. And then we did Essence Fest in 2018 for the first year. And when I got there, I was like, I don't know if I belong in this room. Like,
wow.
We've only been making wine for this very short time. And we're in the room with folks who've been in the business, many, many years ahead of us. And I didn't know if my wines would hold up and stand up to that. But we got enthusiastic response. They were like, consumers were like, your wine is the best in the room. And so that really helped embolden me and let me know, okay, I'm on the right path. This is something I should do. And I feel like always when, the Almighty and the universe and the ancestors are in alignment, that doors will just open that you couldn't imagine. And for me, that's what's happened. It's like people have called me, sent me emails about opportunities, and then everything just, it just falls into place. And so for me, it's been a great journey. And I don't do this by myself. So I don't want people to think like I am the only person doing it. I have an amazing fiance, David, that has been there literally. He came to my very first event. So we talk about day ones. We knew each other previous to that some years, but he came to my very first event. He was like, saw it on Facebook. We were friends, and he was like, I'm gonna come support you. And little did he know that, his life would change or our lives would change, but he would be immersed in this wine universe. And so we've gone across the country pouring wine and having a great time. He impresses on me, and it's taken me about a year to hear it and embrace it. It's fun. He's like, it's fun. He's like, don't be uptight. It's fun. Just breathe. So it's great to have that partner that
yes.
He's in it, but he's also distanced enough to have a different perspective than me, where I'm just like running around, my head cut off, and he's like, it's cool. It's going to work out.
He's like, relax. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy this.
and that's him. That's always his voice. And I'm like, and once I embrace that philosophy that this is really fun, then it's just been a total culture shift for us. And now it's fun. And then my team, I have my niece, Ruby, who comes out and does events for me. My brother, Dennis, comes out. And so it's a family affair that, my family jumps on board, and we have a couple other wine ambassadors. And so it's fun. We make it's a party, and people like always come back and be like, I had a lot of fun when I came, and hung out with y'all. We're like that. And we love to hear that. We're like, that's what's up. That's what's up.
It's funny that, one thing I always think about when it comes to wine culture globally is that it is so family driven. And that it's generational. It's one of the only really like authentically generational businesses that exist in the world. And some of the vineyards that exist in Europe and other parts of the world have been around for so long and have just been passed from family to family. And barring, a couple of wars and invasions and things like that, wine is kind of this industry that holds up globally, in families. And it's funny. It's interesting and refreshing to hear that your family is a part of the process, because it seems like that's just a natural thing to happen when wine is being produced, is that there's a family involved somewhere. And I know I have commented a couple of times is that, in the United States specifically, because African Americans have been removed from the conversation of property ownership and business ownership, that being a wine family is not something that comes naturally. But when you look at world history, that, when you look at hieroglyphs and you look at cave paintings and you look at other things that come from like that place, in those places in Africa where the cradle of life is, you see that wine has been part of the culture for a very long time. And that if we had not been, if we hadn't been separated from our history, I am sure there would be some some really big wine families, with black and brown faces at this point. So it's so nice to see and hear that that's starting to pop up, and it's becoming kind of a natural part of family conversation, especially when someone has decided to go, you know what, we're going to get into wine production. So thank you for pulling your family into that. I don't think people understand, like, these types of businesses flourish and last for hundreds of years because people pull their families into this and they're excited about it, and everyone's like, well, let's get on board and let's do this thing. So thank you for definitely for tying those two things together. I always think about them, but I never have actually heard someone like put words to it or articulate it in such a way where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a legitimate thing. That's a real thing that's happening, that wine is a generational and family type thing. So for where you are now, what did you transition out of? Were you like working in, corporate America? I know you said you were an Army brat. So what was your work before you got into wine?
So before I get into wine, I was doing, so I've had a really interesting career life, but I've been an educator. I was a college professor, and teaching writing and theater, creative writing. And then I've done community engagement work. And so I've done a lot of community engagement, relationship building. And it really was also my partner who told me, he was like, you'll be really great in the wine world because what you're really good at is building relationships. And I had never, how you can't see yourself and others can see you. And I hadn't realized that, but that's what people had been having me do for years. So I would go into a community. There might be a specific project, and, I might go around and engage the neighborhood, get their feedback on things. A lot of times it'd be neighborhood plans or a specific, like, property or economic development project that was happening. So that's what I was doing that. I was doing the wine, but I went to go work in our Northwest. We have an Northwest area, and I went to go work there. And it was supposed to be a 6-month engagement. So I was like, great. I do this for 6 months. I'm growing my business, and everyone knew what I did. Everyone knew I did wine. It was pretty much everybody. When I had my interview, the group of people at the table, and a lot of the people knew me outside of there. And so a lot of people knew I did community engagement. So they were like, "Oh, welcome back. You're coming back." And it lasted 13 months only. And because I left. And I could have stayed much longer, but I was like, sometimes when it's time for you to go. And I felt I had overstayed the time frame. Like 6 months, and then it turned into 9 months. And then next time it was a year. And I was like, there's a lot of things that are available for me, but I can't take advantage of them because I have this, and it wasn't even a full-time job at first. It was part-time. Then it went to full-time, and I had a lot of flexibility, but the opportunities that were coming, like we didn't get our physical commercial space until that's kind of what made me leave. Like I left Thanksgiving of last year, and our commercial space, we were able to move in December 1st. So that was, again, divine timing. So it was like, okay, I now have an opportunity to do this full time and, see what will happen. And I think that, there's that phrase, when you leap, the net will appear. And so I just, it's been a faith walk, and I just walked it out. My parents have always been super supportive. When I said at 8 years old, I'm gonna be a writer, my parents were like, great. They sent me to writer camp. They were like, who can we meet and what can we do? And then when I said, hey, I'm gonna do this wine thing full time, and my parents were like, so do we get some wine? Is that we're gonna make us some wine? And so I've made my parents, they have their own wine, but they've been on board. They like promote me, they tell their friends about me, they share all my stuff. They've come to tastings. My mother's worked events. So, like I said, and my parents live in North Carolina. They don't live where I live, but it's just having that support. My children have worked events with me. So having just that support, it's like, like you said, how can I fail? But it's also the legacy building, because my children may not ever make wine, but I can leave them a company where they can still, my son's in finance, and so he may come back and and be the CFO one day.
Right.
My daughter's in hospitality, and she's done that. She goes through college. Both my children are in college now, and one day she might come back and manage my hospitality program, or at least give us some mental health, to be our mental health provider. So it's great to see that, I've explained to them I'm building this as a legacy, and I don't necessarily expect them to be in the production side. But if I can groom other family members who might have that interest, then it still becomes, like you said, family, a generational family business where it's cousins and, cousins working. And so that's what I really want to do is, because I believe there's not a winery that exists specifically even on the East Coast that hasn't been touched by brown people, by melanated people, because agriculture is in our blood, and we knew how to farm. Yeah. And we came and we did the farming, and we were the vineyard managers. And just someone who didn't look like us had their name on the bottle. But even when we look at like the Uncle Nearest story that's coming out with Jack Daniels, it's always been us that have tilled the soil and built these wine brands and vineyards. And now we're kind of coming full circle where we're moving back to our agricultural roots, and we're reclaiming not only our agricultural roots, but our right to have our name on the forefront of bottles.
That's good. Yeah. I was literally just thinking that. I was like, wow, it's how we have, like, now we can return back to the things that we are so brilliant at and have some dignity within them now, and reclaim our, that the respect that was owed to us to begin with. Yes. Because it's, at some point you can't deny that Black hands and brown hands have been all over the things that the ground produces, on this landmass. It's like, how long do you think we could go until someone, peeped that secret or found out? And, then we're going to have a real conversation about it, because you understand that, we would have not been able to feed ourselves without you all. And that's why we went and got you. So it's, it's one of those things where now we can have a really different conversation about, we did, because I know going into when I started working in food, and we would talk about a lot of things when it came to menu planning and putting things on the plate and things, flavors we were going to cook with and flavor profiles. And the conversation that I was never really ever a part of, were the ones around wine and wine pairings and how to cook with wine and things like that. And it was always interesting to me that, we would get right up to the line and then they would, assume that, well, that's not really something y'all do. Like y'all don't swim and get your hair wet, and you also really don't drink wine. Black people drink brown liquor or malt liquor or a lot of other things, but we don't drink wine. So being left out of those conversations were always interesting to me because I always had a couple of bottles of wine, and that was always part of, my life in general, especially my life in food. And I'm always looking for, new and interesting producers and different parts of the world that are now starting to produce my wine more visibly. So, it's so nice to see in the last few years that as people have learned that Black people travel and that we are global and that we speak more than one language and that we eat a lot of things that aren't deep fried and meat, and we also drink wine and we understand whiskeys and sherries and aperitif, and like we have a real vocabulary and experience with these things. It's the world is, I'm not even know if they know what to do with it just yet. And it's,
they don't.
No, they just, I'm just like, I see people before they jump on to the, you don't know. I think I'm seeing more people just take a pause before they make an assumption like, well, wait a minute. Am I underestimating what could really be happening here? And, in the professional space, as a Black chef, like that, I just have not seen anyone managing a beverage program in a restaurant I have worked in with a brown or Black face at this point. And they're very few and far in between. And it's just like, okay, what do we need to do to help y'all understand that this is a conversation we can have, and that we can have it intelligently and passionately, and we really do know what we're doing. So I'm always intrigued, and like I love to sit back and just kind of watch these parts of the culture blossom and how other people are just paying attention and not really quite sure where to put what's happening just yet. So yeah, so I at this point I'm just kind of like, by next summer this is going to get even more interesting at some point, because now people oh my gosh, people are waking up to like, wait a minute, so that bottle of wine I've been drinking is from a Black producer, and I'm just like, yeah. They're like, oh, I didn't think y'all drank wine or made wine. And I'm just like, but why not? But why not? Like, why wouldn't we? Like, where did you get this idea from? Help me understand the origins of this misconception of yours. And they don't even know.
It's white because it's I showed a group of people. I had 10 different Wine Spectator magazines and asked people to flip through them, and they looked through them, and I was like, anything that you noticed? And only one person was like, well, there's really no white, black people. And then and the white women were all used more as props and as the sex, and the white male was always like, predominant in the photo, like he knew. And that's what I've told people, that, wine, I come from two worlds, writing and the wine world. Those are my passions. And they both deal with old white men. And in the writing world, it's more dead old white men. And so, both of these, that's where, you have to have a certain, like you said, it's a different vocabulary. It's a different, kind of change of thinking. And I think that we, as melanated people, have been left out of that. And because folks think that we are not sophisticated enough to understand, what's happening, where, pretty much probably one of our great grandmas taught your family how to do it.
You're right. You are
first.
Right.
So while they might not have understood the vocabulary, they knew how to make it and make it well. And your family is still following that recipe. So that's what I said. It's in our blood. It's in our lineage, but I still think that you're right. Because when I walk into places, I always have this running joke. I go to a wine shop where it's a couple of them, but they see a lot of people, but they all know my name. The place I go to buy, my bottles, they all know my name. When I call and I ask for something, they'll be like, "Is this Nicole?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm just learning their names, like almost 2 years later. So I'm making it a point now to know, okay, yeah, okay, now I know who that is. But it's interesting that, people, and I've noticed people watch me, and, wine it's a very social drink. It's a drink of business. But like, I've met people strictly based on our tasting profile. Like, we like the same thing. So now I'm getting invited. Well, hey, we go to these events and we buy cases, and you have a really good palate and it matches ours. Are you interested in putting a couple dollars in, so the next time we do an event, or we go to an event, even if you're not there, we'll buy stuff that we know you'll like? So it's interesting to get those opportunities, because that means people have been watching you. They're watching what you taste. They watch what you buy. For me, it's been an interesting journey because I pretty much know most of the distributors in my city. I'm a regular at most of the wine tastings, because I feel like you have to have that education as well. Not necessarily, you don't have to have it to make wine, but I feel like it informs, what you want to do with your wine. So if I taste something and I'm like, I really want to try to recreate that type of flavor profile in my wine, so I'm like, yeah, let me drink some more of that. So I think that, the education is critical. And when I say education, I mean just as simply as drinking the wine. That's the education I'm talking about.
Right.
Going out and drinking it, versus you got to enroll in a formal class. And, there's plenty of free wine education materials, on the interwebs and just in the library and your bookstores. So I think that people can begin to educate themselves that way. And that's part of what we like to do. We not only make wine, which is, fun. We also like to present wine to people, but we want to give people some tips that they can use for when you do go to that business meeting and, God forbid, Moscato is not on the menu for y'all. It's for some folks.
Okay.
So we, try to give like, okay, this is what you can try. And, this is what you can, order, because, I tell people you shouldn't be at a business meeting and get panicked and just go for the Crown and Coke.
Ooh, yeah. Well, and then for the melanated of the world who are listening right now, who are still apprehensive about jumping into the conversation, because I mean the advice I've gotten over a couple of series of interviews at this point is just go and do it. Just go and try it, go and drink it. And I know my own family members and friends who are just like, I just don't want to pick something that I'm not going to like, that is going to be nasty. I know my mother, she is like, I don't like the taste of none of it, and I'm not doing it. And I'm like, Mom, there are so many in the world though. How can you swear off all of it? Yes. I don't like any of it. I'm like, okay, all right. So talk to the melanated people of the world. How do what can they do to build some confidence around the subject, around that point where they, someone hands them the wine menu, hands them the wine list, and they're looking at it and they see cities and countries and regions and styles of grapes, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then because of that lack of confidence and that insecurity, they do go for the Crown and Coke, or they do go for a Sprite, or they do go for something that is just not going to expand their world at all for them. Or, or the ones that are traveling even, we're spending almost $70 billion a year traveling at this point. Yes. I mean, melanated people are everywhere, but because of that, like to your point at the beginning, when you were talking about your background, being in the military and having lived all over the world, you understand that wine is an integral part of the culture in most of the other parts of the world. And now that people see us traveling more, what do they need to know? Like, what can you offer them as a way to think, a way to shift their thinking, an approach. For me, I'm one of those people, I like practicality. And like when I teach a cooking class, I look for the practical and the technical to help people kind of move to the next thing. So what's something practical that they can do, or a piece of information they can have to really allow them to go, okay, I'm gonna breathe. I'm going to look at this menu and look at this wine list and listen to what the sommelier is saying and go, okay, I can feel like I can make an informed choice, and I'm not going to want to spit out a mouthful of wine when it goes in.
And you said a key thing. Start with if the restaurant or the venue you're at has a sommelier. Start with the sommelier and ask those questions. Look, this is what I think I like. Tell them, and then they can point you to something that matches what you're in the mood for that night. And then I tell people, try to just expand. Like if you like sweet wines, that's fine. We all came into wine from a sweet wine. I don't know very many people who started dry. So, move your way along, like try a Riesling, try a late harvest Riesling, and, inch your way up, into, and maybe you just stay in the white world because, we know when you get into reds, they get dry, or maybe try to find something that's big and bold and fruity. So it's going to give you that, a sweeter taste, but I say be adventurous and try something new, and then just do it by the glass, and maybe go with something that's not as costly. But bubbles are always a great choice. So
Yeah.
I'm a champagne fanatic. So bubbles are always a good choice. Just get a sparkling wine, and it goes with everything. And that way you also can't go wrong. So getting a nice Prosecco is a good choice as well. But I think that, we do get flustered because we don't understand regions. I like South African wines. So it's hard for me because most restaurants don't carry them. So then I usually go back to, okay, let me find something California. But I think it's having a sense of adventure, and treating wine with that, childlike curiosity of let's try. And here's the thing too, restaurants will let you try wine before you buy it. So even if you have something you're not sure, and it's maybe 2 or 3 things you're unsure about, they will bring you a tasting of all of those things. They're not going to do 6 or 7 or 8, but 2 or 3, they'll bring you those and let you try them. So that's the other thing. Just ask, because we don't know that either. And so, we don't want to commit to that. I always ask, so can I sample a few things? And they're like, sure. So and I don't go beyond 3, but I might get 1 or 2 things. So I can see what is it that better suits me that evening. So always ask for a sample, and then then you're more assured not to spit out what you get.
Oh, see. I have a visual of someone spitting out some wine. Lord help me.
Yeah.
So what is for me, I like to get a little technical when I have a technician on the line. What is your position on pairing, on food and wine pairing? Some people kind of throw them all out and go just drink what you want with whatever you're eating. Other people are, of course, very traditional, and they're like, no, you don't drink, red wine with fish and when you have a fish, or seafood. And it's just like, okay, well, I think there's some middle ground here. And that now that we have more rosés in the market, now that people are understanding that, pairing champagne and fried chicken is brilliant. And so you're seeing some really cool pairings pop up in some restaurants and gastropubs. So like as a producer and as someone who presents wine and has, as just in these conversations all the time, what is your position on food and wine pairings?
So I love food and wine pairings, but I am of I'm the school of, we're going to try some really different things that are practical. So I know there's, I give people the reds go with the red, the white goes with the white. But like you said, champagne and fried chicken. But I've told people sparkling wine and strawberry Pop-Tarts, you can't get a better late night snack.
Okay.
Yeah, that is like to die for. Like lightly toasted, lightly toast your Pop-Tart. And it's going to be that sweetness. And then the acid in that sparkling wine is going to be it's just it's magic in your mouth. I mean, I can't explain it any better. But I've also done peanut butter and jelly with a red blend, or peanut butter and jelly with a Zinfandel. Again, giving people the balance and like real practical stuff for people to try, that they would be like, oh, like I would never drink a red wine. But I'm like, do you eat peanut butter and jelly? They're like, yeah. Get a red wine, get some peanut butter and jelly. And then I'm like, just thank me later. And I've told people, hit me later and tell me. And they're always like, yeah, that worked. I was like, it works. So I
Wow.
want people to kind of get out of that. Again, making wine less elitist and stuffy is things that we eat all the time. You know, we eat popcorn. So we know popcorn goes also well with Chardonnay. So just everyday items that we would eat. I think somebody comes out every year, and I'm not sure who does it, but I've seen it in multiple places. But like starting in mid-September, early October, there'll be a whole wine pairing list for candy for Halloween that comes out. And I think that's like just super cool. And so this year I was like, we're going to really do a tasting with that. We're going to bring the candy, bring the wine, and let people sit down and do a tasting.
Wow.
And because I have a multitude of friends who are chefs. So I have a friend who, I have two friends who are just vegan. That's it. One who does more vegan comfort food, and one who's more like traditional vegan. And then I have a friend who does paleo, has a paleo restaurant. I have a really good friend who has a seafood restaurant. And so we've taken our wines and just kind of paired it. So now we're on a intentional kind of quest to do these events where we're going to, you know, go to these restaurants or bring food to a venue that is that particular food. So here's seafood and our wines, and how does it pair? Because like, so I think that gives people a better understanding of wine. And again, it makes it accessible. It's stuff that people would eat every day.
Wow. Well, you know what, that Halloween candy list and that wine pairing, that's that might make an appearance on a blog post or something at some point. For future wine producers, for like a young person who is not quite sure what they want to do with life just yet, and they like food and beverage, they like culinary, they like service, but they aren't quite sure if they want to cook for a living. And wine has been coming up, and they're really interested in becoming a producer. What information can you offer them? What advice and steps can they start with to kind of find themselves kind of at the end of maybe their college journey, or if someone's making a career change and they're like, you know what, I think I want to get into this world a little bit and get into wine production. What information can you offer them to get started?
So I say wherever you're located, try to find a wine mentor. If there's somebody, a melanated person, try to talk to them. If not, go to a winery and ask, can you kind of hang around? Can you look at the process? College students, I say even start it in your dorm room or wherever you happen to live. Start it while you're in college. Don't wait till you get out. Do it now. And so you can go to almost every city has a wine and brew shop, with all the supplies. So I say start there. You can either start with a kit to kind of see the process, and then most places get fresh grapes in. And I say start that way, actually just kind of jump into it, and then you'll know. Of course, that's a small scale, but you'll know if that's something because it's a schedule to it, and you got to keep things clean, and you actually have to keep a notebook. So wine is both nature, art, and science all in one. I loved chemistry as a kid. So for me, it's the best of both worlds. It's that creativity and blending something, and that finally, going in the barrel after it's sitting and tasting it and be like, yeah, this, that, this is it. And I mean, I'm usually it's me by myself, but I drink everything that, I try everything before I bottle it. And so a lot of times, I'm always surprised, wow, this came out like incredibly, far better than what I would have ever thought, it would have came out. And so for me, I said, that's what I say is really go get the hands on, find someone who will will help you walk through it. There are some resources, online about, starting at winery, but a lot of them are still like big scale. Like if you're going to go and build this thing and you're going to plant acres and acres of grapes, which now you don't necessarily have to get into the vineyard part if that's not your thing, if growing's not your thing, you can buy fresh grapes and you can find a great broker. There's a lot of farms that will, that are producing the grapes and they will sell them to you by the ton or by the, 5-gallon pails. So I think starting it and seeing if it's something that you want to commit your life to. Like, I know I love all my Psalm friends and I'm like, y'all go, I'm cheering them on, but a service in a restaurant is not my passion.
Right.
So I'm like, that's not what that's not my interested, but I am in the education portion because that's in my gifting and talent. So I'm studying to be a certified specialist of wine because that matches my talents. Even though I'm making wine, I just like the language and the love. Like a friend of mine told me that wine is her love language. And I was like, girl, you couldn't have said it better. Like, that's it for me. Wine is my love language. So to me, in pouring for people and sharing wine with people, that's how I give and receive love back. And so I think for a young person, get into it, try to meet, try some of the internship programs of, larger companies that are the larger scale, bigger wineries that have summer internships. Go work a harvest. Tuani with Zuri Wine Tours, she went to South Africa and worked a harvest, I think 2 years, 2 different harvests. And I think she's now looking for a harvest to do. She's back in California, back in LA. So find a farm that grows grapes in your area and participate in the harvest. And a lot of times they'll let you come back, you'll go through all of it, the picking the grapes, the crushing, the distemming. And then, they'll probably let you hang out and see how the wine is made. So that's what I would say. Find someone who will share that knowledge with you, kind of try to get it firsthand. I was fortunate. I have someone, same thing in my city, that let me come in, let me look at their operation. And he had only one request. He was like, please don't put your winery anywhere near mine. He was like, just don't put it in this area. But so he was gracious enough to do that for me. And so I think that to me is key. The wine world, it is both competitive, but I think also embracing as well.
I love that. And I think that's the, kind of the food and wine community overall is like, we can be competitive with each other, but there's also this really beautiful sense of camaraderie, and we will create space for you. You just, if you're going to show up to the space, you just be prepared to compete. And, yes. I think that allows us to produce at our best, though, because we're not competing with you to destroy you. We're competing with you to make you better. Because for me, I'm like, I want to cook against the best. So if you're not there yet, I'm going to push you. And if that's me, out cooking you, then that's just how that's going to happen until you surpass me. So yeah, I think that energy is pretty well balanced within this community of people who serve food and beverage to the rest of the world, because we want to offer the best to the world, and so we push each other in that way. So with these last few moments I have of your night, what is it that we can support you in? What do we need? What do people need to attend, buy tickets for, buy bottles? Is there some type of subscription on the website that people can sign up and get a wine delivery every week? Like, what? Yes. How can we support you?
So again, we're a micro winery. We're growing. So supporting Sip and Share Wines is joining our wine club. Right now we are quarterly. We do monthly as well if people request that. But we have a quarterly wine subscription, 2, 4 or 6 bottles, ships to your home. There's a few states we don't ship to, but overall we ship pretty much everywhere in the United States. And that really is a way to support us, because then we know, we have that wine that's going out. There's, that accountability from us to you to get you our best product. But if there's an event in your area that you want us to go to, and we travel, we've gone to New Orleans, so we drove 12 hours to New Orleans. We're going to be going to Maryland next month for the Unwine With Us Wine Fest. So if there's a festival or something in your area that's either vegan related or melanin related or woman related or wine related, invite us, inbox us, let us know, and we'll try our best, if our schedule is accommodating enough, to show up in that, to that area. So because we want to engage with our customers, so we want them to taste the wine and engage with us while we're there, so that we can create reoccurring customers that come back, that become loyal to the brand, that really want to help, spread the word and become basically the evangelists for Sip and Share Wines.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, what's the website? Sipandshare.com, sipandshare.co?
SipandShareWines.com. So that's sip, the word, and sharewines.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Sip and Share Wines as well. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, so they can find us on all the regular social media channels. And come engage with us. Find us on social media. Again, invite us to your city and buy a wine club membership.
Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, every single episode, I'm coming for y'all, because I don't want to hear nothing that I don't know, I didn't know, she didn't say, I don't remember. You can download the episode and rewind it. You can jot down the notes. You can find the notes on the website. You have no excuses at this point. And, my goal is to eliminate the excuses that we have given each other to not support businesses within our community. And so you have opportunities to support, to follow, and to purchase. And for me, support equals dollars. So don't come at me with she's doing great, I love her stuff, and you ain't bought nothing. Somebody in your life likes some wine. Buy them a bottle or a subscription and stop playing. So
there you go.
That's my 2 cents at this point. So thank you again, Nicole. I appreciate you and your work and your family and what you guys are doing to just re-engage people in the conversation around how melanated people are connected to wine and wine production in the world overall, and not just in this country. And then, creating a generational business that people can see visibly and, can support and and grow with. So thank you again. And like I said, next season, when I do these follow-up interviews, it will likely be video. So then we'll be able to have a real sit-down conversation, and people can actually see your face and maybe get a tour of the production and see where you guys are at. And then and we can just watch your growth and applaud your growth. So thank you again.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And everybody, again, happy Wine Wednesday. Drink some great wine during this lifetime, everybody.
All right. Well, you have a good night, and we will talk to you soon.
The Afros and Knives podcast series is 100% listener supported. We love our community of listeners. To continue to see this podcast series grow, it needs your financial support. We want to add a video series and continue to shine a spotlight on all that is brilliant and Black all over the world. Consider making a pledge or becoming a patron of the Afros and Knives content today. Your generosity is deeply appreciated. Visit www.afrosandknives.com to make a pledge of financial support today, and thank you.